Hello, Good Tree. This is Paul here to answer some questions you might have regarding creation according to the Bible. We are going through the New Answers book number 1, 25 questions and 25 answers. Today, we're going to cover chapter 6 and answer the question, Cain's wife. Who was she? The question of Cain's wife is a common one that opponents of Christianity will throw out to prove that the Bible is just full of contradictions. Because if Adam and Eve were the first humans on earth, then where would Cain have found his wife? However, this question is one that's important to Christians for more than just defending the reliability of Scripture. The question of Cain's wife is one that's critical to the gospel message. The Bible is clear that sin entered the world through one man, and because we're all descendants of that one man, Adam, we're all in sin. If Cain's wife was not a descendant of Adam, there is no sin. The Bible is also clear that just as sin entered the world through one man, salvation will come through one man, Jesus, and becoming the new Adam, all of Adam's descendants could find salvation in Jesus. But if Cain's wife was not a descendant of Adam, there is no salvation. It's critical for Christians to find Cain's wife to be a descendant of Adam to defend the reliability of Scripture and the gospel message itself. Genesis 3:20 states, "And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living." The Bible is telling us that all people are descendants of Eve, as she's the mother of all living. Cain's wife had to be a descendant of Adam and Eve and couldn't have come from another family or race. Although Genesis specifically mentions Cain, Abel, and Seth as the children of Adam and Eve, the first couple had more children than just these three men. The Bible tells us that after Seth, Adam lived 800 years and had more sons and daughters. Traditions say that he had 33 sons and 23 daughters, and 800 years of being fruitful and multiplying tells us that it may have been more. There would have been plenty of women for Cain to have taken as his wife, and there's no need to speculate that Cain's wife came from a family outside of Adam and Eve. If Cain's wife came from Adam and Eve, this meant that she was probably his sister or close relative like a niece. Isn't that a huge problem? After all, didn't God make a law against incest? While God did outlaw incest in Leviticus, this was part of God's law that he gave to Moses about 2,500 years later. The reason that incest is so bad is because of the biological deformities it causes in children when close relatives marry. When children are born, they inherit a set of genes from each parent. But because we live in a sinful and fallen world, there are mistakes in the genes that are passed on. However, the genes from each parent work together to be able to cover up those mistakes so that the child is born without much problems. But siblings and close relatives have very similar genes. This means that they also share much of the same mistakes in their genes. So when close relatives marry, the same mistakes in the genes double up and become more present in the child. And this is why children of siblings and close relatives are born with many defects and complications. However, during the time of Adam and Eve, there were virtually no mistakes in their genes because they were made perfect. Although sin entered the world, the mistakes in their genes were very slight and small because they didn't yet have a chance to multiply and grow through many generations. This is why it was okay for siblings and close relatives to marry and have children early on. However, as more generations passed and the mistakes slowly grew and multiplied, God saw that it was finally time to forbid incest in order to protect the future generation of children being born from defects and complications. This was around the time of Moses, and at that point, the world had been populated enough that the relationships with close relatives were no longer necessary. There are some questions that come up when we look at Cain's exile to the land of Nod for his murder of his brother Abel. Some say that Cain found his wife at Nod, and this meant that there were other humans on the earth that didn't come from Adam and Eve. But when we look at the Bible never says that Cain's wife was from a family in Nod. It simply says that Cain had relations with his wife even after being exiled to Nod. Others point to Cain's fear of being killed for murdering Abel as proof that there were other humans. But there were other humans. It's just that they were children of Adam and Eve. Cain was afraid of them because he had just killed not only his brother, but theirs too. People will also point to the fact that Cain built a city in Nod and say that this meant that there were generations of a civilization before him that helped him to achieve the technology required to build a city. But we must not forget that in Adam and Eve's days, people lived for hundreds of years and had nearly perfect genes without any mistakes. It would be no tall task to imagine that Cain could have built an entire city in Nod. One of the reasons that it's difficult for Christians to answer the question of Cain's wife is that they're trying to read Scripture through the world. They look at the problems found in incest today and our current lifespans of technology and can't understand how Adam and Eve populated the world. However, if we look at the context of the time and understand that it was a different world there and then compared to here and now, all the problems seem to disappear. In fact, the history found in the Bible seems to offer the best explanation for the reason that the world is the way it is today. It's always important that as believers we remember to look at the world through Scripture rather than looking at Scripture through the world.